welcome. So for everyone in the audience, I am very honored to moderate a panel like this. It's very, very, very difficult to gather the information these people have. You don't gather it casually. They've all put in very, very many long years going against the grain to find information that was not being offered in friendly newspapers. So very happy to have them. Dr. Davis spoke at the second Real Truth About Health conference in New York. And at the time, I was optimistic we were going to make a lot of progress quickly, but a lot has happened since then. And so anyway, why don't you each give a 1 minute opening just to tell us who you are, what you've been doing for the last 15 years. When you go Theodora, then Magda, then Bill, and then Devra, and then I'll go into questions.
Okay, great. So I'm Theodora Scarato, and I am directing the Wireless and EMF program at Environmental Health Sciences. So stay tuned. I'll put some links in the chat as well about our investigations. And there's been a lot going on. I think that a lot is changing. I don't know what's going to be happening in the next few years. We will see. But the issue has really grown, I think, because of the push for 5G and all the deregulation that has happened for these towers going up near homes and schools, and people are becoming more aware of this issue and wanting to make changes in their home once they learn about what's going on outside with the cell tower. So I think that that's really important, and it's important to educate people on this issue so they understand it, and also so they have some tools so that they can take action in their local, state, and federal government, generally all of which are not accountable. Anyway, I'll talk more later. So thank you. 1 minute.
Thank you.
I'm Magda Havas. Sorry, I'm just about to lose my voice. I'm a retired professor, and I'm fascinated by the way our bodies react to electromagnetic frequencies, both the harmful ones and the beneficial ones. And that goes for natural frequencies that we get from the planet Earth and from the solar system, as well as some of the man-made or technological frequencies. I'm really fascinated by not only radio frequency radiation, but dirty electricity, low frequency electric and magnetic fields, and also ground current, which very few people know about. And I'm really passionate about sharing information with politicians, with the media, if they will cover it, and with medical doctors so that they can do a better job helping their patients recover from electrohypersensitivity.
I'm Bill Cadwallader. I'm a certified electromagnetic radiation specialist. So it's about a 2-year course and about 16 classes we have to do to get certified. So my practice is in Nevada, Utah, California, and Arizona. And what we do is we go out and, as Magda said, we measure all the different types of radiation, from Wi-Fi, wireless, Bluetooth, commonly called RF, and then dirty electricity, electric radiation, magnetic radiation, and again, earth currents, very, very important. And then we spend about 25% measuring. We have commercial tools, and then we spend 75% fixing right on the spot. So when we leave, over 98% of things are actually done. And compared to years ago, the numbers in a house with so many wireless devices have increased exponentially, and the average person has no idea. But they're very willing to change, and that's very, very gratifying. So thanks again for having us on the panel.
Dr. Davis, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Devra Davis. I'm an epidemiologist and toxicologist, and I'm a mother and a grandmother. And as a grandmother, I became concerned about this issue more than 20 years ago when my first grandchild was born, and he was able to find a phone, turn it on and play a game when he was 9 months old.
Wow.
knew we had to take better care of the developing brain. And what I found out then has propelled me ever since to work with some of the world's top experts. And I was thrilled to have Theodora Scarato work with us as executive director for a number of years. And now we're working with the new leadership, which has come in that spoke with you today, Dr. Kent Chamberlain as president and Dr. Rob Brown as vice president for science and clinical affairs.
Thank you. All four of you have given individual presentations, which were absolutely amazing, really amazing. And I feel very lucky to have been able to hear the information that you so generously researched and shared with us. So thank you for those really, really amazing, somewhat difficult to hear presentations because, like I said, this a lot of momentum to keep that this is going to keep going, the wireless challenges. So, okay. So I guess the best way to do this is, in this case, would be not to go into great detail on each answer, although I understand that you could answer each question with a tremendous amount of information. I would request that we try to approach this differently, and we try to do a lot of questions with 1-minute answers. So this way, we get to hear your conclusion. You won't tell us all the detail. That was what your individual presentation was more for. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to direct it at a specific one of you. Anyone else who wants to jump in can, but let's try to stay focused on this so that we can get to a lot of points. Okay. So starting with Bill. Bill, what are some safer and more efficient alternatives to compact fluorescing light bulbs for the home lighting?
So, about a year and a half ago, the U.S. government outlawed all incandescent bulbs. And so in essence, the incandescents are now not being manufactured or imported. And so, but there still are supplies. So I would go after incandescent bulbs, try to get as many as you can currently. And then also halogen. So if the halogen has a large base on it that you can screw in, then it's not changing the voltage. It's running off 120 volts. So those would be the two I would use instead of CFLs and LEDs. When I go into a home, I have a good, better, and best solution. So if they've put 60 LED lights in the ceiling that they're not going to change out, what we do is say, always keep them off whenever possible. Only put them on when you absolutely need them. But the LEDs are a huge problem, similar to the CFLs.
Thank you. Dr. Davis, what was the significance of the scientific evidence presented in the Italian Supreme Court case that linked cell phone use to a brain tumor?
Well, the evidence was both experimental and some epidemiological. That court also looked at exposure information so that in this particular case, the tumor was actually located near the hearing nerve. So, but the important thing is that court did something that American courts have not done lately. They said, is there animal evidence of risk? And is the animal evidence persuasive so that we should protect humans? What we're doing in the United States now, unfortunately, is asking, show me the proof, show me the dead bodies, and ignoring and dismissing the animal evidence.
Okay, thank you. Magda, can you explain in simpler terms how ground current as moving electrons can flow through the ground? In other words, what is ground current? Is this another thing we have to be concerned about? I thought that if I took my shoes off and walked on the ground, that was the best possible thing I could do for my health. I don't even know if I want to know about another problem, but what is ground current, and do I need to think or know anything about this?
Okay, well, very briefly, the ground has a negative potential compared to the air. And so when you're in contact with the ground, you're equilibrating with the electrons, which is a good thing. You want those electrons to flow into your body. having an excess of electrons is actually better than having a dearth of electrons, which is what free radicals are trying to grasp, these electrons. With the reason we have a problem with ground current is because of our electrical system. It was designed, back in the, 50s, 60s, 70s. And we have a lot of electronic devices now that don't have just a smooth 60 hertz sine wave that has dirty power. And when you have dirty power, it's very difficult to balance everything. When things are out of balance, the neutral wire that is supposed to bring the electrons back to the source. So you've got a circuit, you've got hot wires, and then you've got the neutral wire. It's supposed to bring things back to the source, your generating plant. It doesn't have enough capacity. And so what the utility should be doing is putting in a really thick neutral wire or two thinner neutral wires. It's almost like, you have rush hour traffic going out in the morning, and then you have rush hour traffic coming back at night. But the rush hour traffic coming back at night doesn't have the right amount of space on the road. And so they're actually going off on the margins. So basically what the utility has done to save money is they've connected their neutral to ground. And so some of the electrons are actually coming back through ground. And this is what's causing the problem. In the 1950s, when farms were just beginning to become electrified, they wanted to save money. So they only put a hot wire out to the farm, thinking that the return wire could actually bring things back and it would save them money. And as soon as they did that, the cows became sick, the farmers became sick. So we know the current shouldn't be in the ground, and it's the dirty electricity that's flowing along the ground that's causing the problem.
Thank you. Theodora, you discussed the concept of first-hand, second-hand, and third-hand exposure to wireless radiation. Could you explain the different types of exposure and how to minimize each?
Okay, I'm gonna just do an overview. So firsthand would be those devices you use really close to your body, say the phone when you put it to your head or you put it in your pocket, it's emitting all the time. I also would add in these things, which are right in your ears all the time. So we have these devices very close to us, kind of like smoking, when the smoker is smoking. Then secondhand could be in your home. You've got, gosh, I went to my dad's house. He's got a Wi-Fi printer. It was literally right in his office right there. You've got the cordless home phone base. So you've got the phone, which you're holding to your head, cordless phones, they emit radiation, and then the base, which is emitting all the time. I heard now that there are averaging 20, I think that's an understatement, wireless devices in our homes. So it might be the baby that the mother is holding or the parent's holding, and the adult is holding a phone right up to their head. I see this all the time. It breaks my heart because parents don't know. So that's secondhand, right? Like secondhand smoke. And then you could say third hand, I mean, I just sort of made this up, but I think it makes sense, would be the cell towers, which are outside, the 5G towers, the big, high voltage power lines, or stations, electrical substations and so forth. So all of those are important because we are being exposed all the time. You can change your firsthand exposures, but you often can't mitigate your secondhand and certainly your third hand. Or if you're working, you're being exposed, you often have no choice, as do many people just from virtue of where they're living. So I'll also put some links in the chat, but you can reduce exposure by first keeping a distance from those firsthand sources, choosing corded technology. Like my laptop, I'm using a Ethernet cord, right? Or not saying no to the smart tech that's just unnecessary, choosing other systems, from speakers to printers and so forth, decreasing your time. So there's corded, decreasing time using wireless devices, being near wireless devices, but actually one of the most important things is getting involved in your local community with people, organizing them, educating your policymakers so that there are choices that people can make, because a lot of people can't make choices about the exposures they have every day. And so that the corporations and companies, which right now it's the Wild West, they can do whatever they want. so that they will be more accountable on this issue. And that is a key piece for any of you listening who are new to this. You might be like, wait, what? Get involved, find out who in your community is working on this, and see what power you have together in working on this issue, because there's a lot of changes that can happen in every state and in every country.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bill, in your experience, what is the most common source of excessive electromagnetic radiation in homes today?
So it's the phone that Theodora talked about. It's the Wi-Fi router. And now the Wi-Fi router, most clients now I go in cannot turn it off anymore. So what they do is it runs the doorbell that takes a picture of you. It runs the thermostats that are Wi-Fi, and then everything else in the house, all the streaming. And so all of those are a big issue. What we normally do, so we'll talk about shielding. What we normally do, if they can't turn off the Wi-Fi router, then we have a bag that we put it over that really drops it. And then for the phones, I like these cell phone bags. We were talking a little bit before we started, that you put your phone in a cell phone bag. In this particular bag from Safe Living Technologies, you can still get all your text, emails, and voicemails, and it'll still ring, but it drops it down 80 to 90%. So it's not a Faraday bag. So you don't want to hold this on your chest, but if you put it at arm's length or when you're in a car, and then make sure after you put the phone in, just zip it up like, zip it up like that and turn the hole away from you or feed it down. But I'm doing just so many wireless products inside the home that I have to put a bag on to knock it down.
Dr. Davis.
Yeah, let me just add, there's one other thing that we can add to the excellent suggestions that you've both made, and that is you can turn devices off. You can even get timers to put on switches so that they automatically get turned off and turned on again if they must be turned on. But I think that we get so used to these things sending us this radiation 24/7 that we forget that you can actually turn things off sometimes. Now, some of these things, as you know, Bill, like the Nest meters and the phones and surveillance cannot easily be turned off. But whatever you can turn off, get in the habit of doing it. You do not need, nor should you allow yourself to be interrupted at night by phone calls or text messages. Unless you're in a hurricane or a national emergency. What these phones do is they make all of us feel like it's an emergency all the time.
I agree, Dr. Davis. Turn off as much stuff as you can. No question.
Thank you. Dr. Davis, can you elaborate on some of the key findings from human research and real-world data that you find most concerning regarding EMF exposure?
Well, I think my colleague, Dr. Brown, referred to it today. We know that there are certain types of cancer cells, there are certain types of human cells that have been studied in cultures that clearly respond by growing out of control when exposed to electromagnetic fields. And we've known this for more than 4 decades, And yet we've not acted to reduce our exposures. If anything, as you all understand, and that's why we're here, our exposures have increased many, many fold. So we have the issue of the blood-brain barrier, which is also vulnerable. And the blood-brain barrier, think about it, every membrane of your billions of cells is vulnerable because we know that electromagnetic fields can disrupt the channels that create the membranes, the chemicals that hold the gates open and closed that allow messages to get into the nucleus of the cell. Those very chemicals are affected directly by electromagnetic field. Then in the human evidence, which we have, of course, we've got growing concerns about brain cancer and thyroid cancer, and now leukemia and breast cancer. We have modeled the breast, which is entirely fat, and we know that it will absorb as much radiation as you put next to it. And we avoid ionizing radiation for many reasons, and we need to avoid non-ionizing radiation for some of the same reasons. I think some of the strongest human evidence is damage to sperm and effects on the immune system, which is a very vague but a critically important part of the human body. If our immune system stops doing its job of snuffing out bad cells, then we can't survive.
Thank you. Dr. Havas, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Havas.
Havas, sorry. Regarding pulsed electromagnetic fields, PEMF treatment, has there been any significant long-term studies on if these pulsed electromagnetic field mats or treatments have health benefits?
Well, PEMF technology has been used since the 1970s, originally for healing non-union bone fractures. And these just don't heal on their own. So it's been incredibly effective. There's no evidence that I've been able to find showing that there's a harmful effect of these PEMF devices. Having said that, if you're electrosensitive, you might want to test them out before, because some electrosensitive people can't use them until they get to a certain level of health prior to using them. But PEMF devices, light technology, I really believe this is going to be used much more in healthcare than it is currently. It's being used in Europe, it's being used in Asia, but it's not being used in North America to the degree that it could be. And
a lot of athletic teams, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Devra.
As you know, a lot of athletic teams now are employing these devices and have been for years.
That's right. What it does is it actually gives your mitochondria more energy. It helps circulation of the blood. It reduces inflammation. And all of these are beneficial irrespective of what the illness is that you have. So it really promotes the healing of the body irrespective of the illnesses.
Thank you. Bill, for someone new to this topic, can you simply explain what dirty electricity is and what causes it?
Yeah, dirty electricity are technically high frequency voltage transients and harmonics, but anytime you take the 120 volts and you reduce it to 24 volts or less, there's normally a switching mode power supply now. And anytime you do that, it creates tons of these spikes, thousands of times a second. So solar does it a lot on the homes. I'm finding that in the Southwest. I live in Las Vegas. Now they're putting the backup batteries for the solar. That's causing huge amounts. Any new motor or motor for HVAC and pools, their variable speed, that creates a lot of dirty electricity. Any electronics you put in your home creates tons of dirty electricity because they don't run on 120 volts, as Magda was talking about, that our system was not designed to run on 24 volts, but 120. And as they reduce that voltage, any electronic device you plug in creates tons of dirty electricity. And the good news is there are meters to do that. So there's meters, like here's a Stetzer meter. And I think I talked about the green wave meter. Here are the 2 meters that are the most popular. And with a meter, you can knock it down. So that's the bad news is you have it. The good news is that there is a way of doing it. And your neighbors put a lot of dirty electricity on the grid that is sucked into your house that you have no control over now. So it's a huge problem. So it's one of the least, the subject of EMFs that people normally don't talk a lot about, but it's a huge part of solving all the EMF issues.
But may I add that there have been some reports that the Stetzer filters are not as effective. I'm not familiar with the green wave technology, but I want to add something. I think we would all agree it's not our job and shouldn't be our job to tell you what's safe or safer. that is the job of the government and the private sector. And that's why Environmental Health Trust is demanding that companies now compete on safety. We want safer products. We're not saying no to technology. We're just saying yes to health. And people ought to be entitled to do that.
Thank you. Theodora, what are some of the health issues beyond cancer that have been linked to EMF exposure in scientific studies?
Well, beyond cancer, I think Dr. Davis talked about this as well, and I talked about it in my talk. I mean, really, if you think about it, if your whole body is being exposed, all the systems have cells, and there are impacts that have been documented in animal studies and human studies. And some of these areas, more research may need to be done, not enough to take action on this issue, but impacts to sperm, impacts to the ovaries and animal studies. There's research on people that have been done, which is complicated because people have a lot of things and there's a lot of factors involved, but research on people living near cell towers that has found increased cancer as well as biochemical changes in the blood, that constellation of symptoms, microwave syndrome, electromagnetic radiation syndrome, there's electromagnetic sensitivity. There are a lot of names that are being used for the constellation of symptoms like headaches, dizziness, nausea, brain fogs, sleep issues, and so forth. But I think inflammation and oxidative stress is really important because that can then lead to other impacts, and every person is different. We all have different genetic makeups, different factors in our life. We may, between the food and the water and the pollution. I think another really important area is synergistic effects. When they've done studies looking at combined exposures and found impacts, the Ramazzini Institute, which looked at also low frequency fields combined with a known toxin and found increased cancer. So that's not beyond cancer, but there's research showing synergistic effects with black carbon, which is an air pollutant, heightened toxicity from that. And there's just almost every body of your every part of your body is going to be impacted. And thankfully we're resilient so that we have, our health, and we don't know, what different parts of our body can be impacted at different times. So everything we do makes a difference on this issue. It's really important to keep that in mind. If you're feeling, I'm seeing some in the chat, if you're feeling like, oh my goodness, or someone wrote me and said, oh no, what? I'm just learning about this issue. So everything we do makes a difference. And it's really important to continue to get educated and share this information.
Thank you.
Could I just comment on that? I like to simplify it as much as possible. I think the effects fall into three groups. One is cancer, and there's a variety of cancers. The other are reproductive problems, particularly with sperm, but beyond that. And the third is electrohypersensitivity or electromagnetic radiation syndrome, which is what it's being called now. And that's a grab-all for anything that affects your nervous system, your hormonal system, your immune system, basically. So basically three categories, and they're all affected by all the different types of electromagnetic fields, from low frequency all the way up to millimeter waves.
Thank you. Dr. Davis, because it's so important, would you like to go into a little bit more detail about EMF's impact on sperm viability and function, and with the current evidence on how wireless radiation might affect human male fertility? You sort of mentioned it already, but a little more detail on it.
I'm happy to give you a few comments, but first let me just say, we have to recognize that when it comes to what is evidence in this field, industry has captured the flag. They have, and now much of the peer review, the few journals that are relevant, there's been a real effort to discredit and dismiss science that shows damage. You have to acknowledge that. And even despite that, we have found that research that's been done in Europe, principally, has shown damage to sperm. Our colleague Süleyman Kaplan in Turkey has repeatedly shown that prenatally exposed animals will develop smaller testes with lower sperm count. Now, the mechanism that may be relevant here has to do with the mitochondria. Mitochondria are kind of the engine of the cell. And we know that sperm without strong engines are not very effective. I thank Theodora for putting in a number of links that I want to bring your attention to in the chat about material that is useful, that would be relevant to this issue. But specifically, your question on sperm has to do with mitochondria. What we know is that if you take 2 test tubes of sperm from a healthy male, and one test tube gets 20 minutes of exposure to cell phone radiation, and the other gets none, and you then evaluate what happens to them. Well, normally they're all going to die because, of course, sperm aren't meant to live outside of a test tube. But the rate at which they die is 3 times faster if they've been exposed to just a small amount of cell phone radiation. Wow. And the rate at which they develop deformities and that their engines don't work as well is also much higher if they've been exposed to cell phone radiation. So that's telling us in a very vivid way that cell phone radiation damages sperm.
Thank you. Magda, I'm sorry, Dr. Havas.
Magda's fine.
Magda's fine, okay. We're talking a lot about if you have a cell phone in your pocket or a cell phone next to your head. What if you go to sleep at night and the cell phone is 15 feet away on the floor being plugged in? Is this 98% less of a problem, or is it still a problem? It's now you're in the bed, it's 15 feet away, it's on the floor, it's on. Have I significantly reduced my risk and my concern, or are you saying, no, this is secondhand exposure and this still concerns you a lot?
Well, you're still exposed because your cell phone, even though you're not using it, is trying to connect with a cell tower every few seconds. So it's going to send out signals during the night. And it's the total cumulative exposure that seems to be a problem, as well as the really high spikes that it occasionally reaches. If you need to have your cell phone on because you get calls in the middle of the night, you're a maternity ward doctor or something, so you have to be on call. I would recommend what Bill said. Put it into one of those Faraday K bags. Turn your Wi-Fi, your Bluetooth off, and just keep on, your cell phone, and keep it as far away from your bed as possible. The bag is going to reduce your exposure, and the distance is going to reduce your exposure. The critical thing is if you're in a bedroom here and you put your phone here, but there's another bedroom here, that bedroom is going to get that exposure because it goes right through the wall. So make certain that wherever you put it, there's not someone on the other side exposed at a much closer distance.
Thank you. Bill, what is the significance of the BioInitiative Report, and what are some of its key findings regarding electromagnetic radiation?
So the BioInitiative Report started in about 2007, 2008, and I think the last update was 2022. And they originally looked at about 1,800 articles, peer-reviewed articles. And then I think the last one was about 3,800. And it showed that the biological effects on non-ionizing radiation throughout the body, it was just, there were over 20 MDs and PhDs that reviewed it, and it just showed conclusively that there's this many studies, and now there's over 5,000 studies. But again, they did about 3,800. And I often ask clients, I said, how many studies would it take you not to smoke? They say, I don't know, 50, 100, something like that. I said, well, how many studies would it take you just to change some habits on your cell phone? Like move it into the bathroom, put it in a bag. And now there's over 5,000 studies. And again, as Theodora and I think Magda talked about, and that the studies that are supported by the cell phone companies, they tend to always come out favorable for the cell phone companies, and the ones that aren't, a great majority of them who are not paid by the cell phone companies talk about all the risks. And the risk goes all the way down, actually under 100 microwatts per meter squared. So again,
Thank you. Theodora, what is the EMF scientist appeal and what are its main recommendations regarding wireless technology?
Oh, so the EMF Scientist Appeal was started in 2015, and I think it's been now signed by over 258 experts who have published in the field of electromagnetic radiation. So they are experts in electromagnetic radiation, health, and environment. And they're calling for protected spaces, for government changes, for protecting vulnerable groups, especially for independent science, getting industry out of the issue. I have to pull it up for really the global changes that we need to the UN and the World Health Organization and to all governments. And it's been signed by scientists from all over the world. They have a list of all the signatories online. I'll put a link in the chat. Really important. This is a really important appeal. And I'll note that there have been appeals going back for decades. I'm sure people on this call have been in those appeals, and it's time that we listen to the scientists who are putting public health and environment first.
Okay.
There have been more than 39 appeals since 1998, I believe. So, you know, the EMF scientist appeal is just one of them in 2015, but there's been quite a few before and after.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Devra, research has hinted that EMF exposure could influence learning and memory processes. What mechanisms might explain these effects in people, and what evidence do we have so far?
The tragedy, Stephen, and it's a real tragedy, is that we have had animal evidence showing that prenatally exposed animals develop cerebellums and critical parts of the brain that we know are involved in balance, learning, and memory. They get damage to their brains from prenatal exposure to cell phone radiation. We've known that for more than a decade in several animal studies done by our colleagues in Turkey. Now we are seeing evidence in human children. Studies have followed children exposed prenatally, and we're starting to see evidence of harm. In addition, studies have been done in Austria and Germany, where they looked at teenagers and looked at their memory as judged by a number of standardized tests for evaluating memory, and particularly spatial memory, their ability to remember certain spaces. And they found that those who used phones the most had the most impaired memory. And think about that when our teenagers are going to be driving. And those who are on the phones the most, which is a lot of teenagers nowadays, have an impaired memory. So we think the mechanism that may be involved, of course, is effects in the brain. We know, and the effects in the brain can be demonstrated through animal studies. So what are we doing to our children now? We need to do a better job of getting the information that all of us have presented here today and in many other forums. We need to do a better job of getting that information out. There is the International Commission on Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields that Libby Kelly and Ron Melnick have been involved with, and I know they've tried to do a good job of getting good information out. Paul Heroux, pronounced in French, Heroux, Heroux, has done a brilliant job of documenting problems. And so we have got the science. What we don't have is the public arena to present it beyond this group here. So if everybody out there will go to our websites and share the information we have, and each one of you will go to 10 others, we have a chance to make more of an impact now. That's what we need to do.
Thank you. Magda, what about for those of us that are saying, I'm getting exposed at work, at home, I'm doing everything I can, but I'm still getting exposed. What about devices? What about the necklace I wear? What about all the different devices that claim they neutralize it. Like there's lots of companies with lots of devices, some very expensive. Do they work? Do you recommend some of them? Is there any evidence that they do work? There's a company called Blue Shield that claims that they put out another signal that sort of neutralizes it. I'd love to believe some of these things would make me happier, but is there evidence they work? What are your thoughts on this?
We actually tested some of these devices, and we found that when we're measuring the radio frequency radiation, it doesn't change at all. And then I realized that what we really need to do is test the human body as to how the human body is reacting to the radiation, because these devices don't block radiation. They claim all sorts of other things, different devices claiming different things. And we've had some very limited evidence that some devices could benefit some people. But the same device, while it might be beneficial to someone, it might not have any effect on someone else. So I'm not in favor of these devices. I really think that what we need to do is simply minimize our exposure. And then we can do other things as well with nutrients and some of the other things that people talked about on your conference. And I think if we did all of those things, got plenty of exercise, sunshine, all the good healthy things that we know are healthy, I think that would go a long way. The body has an amazing ability to heal. We just have to give it that opportunity. And if you're constantly exposed, your body can't heal. It's in a fight or flight mode. And so we've got to get back into a parasympathetic mode where your body is relaxing, it's healing, it's rebuilding the tissue that's been damaged during the day. I think that's the best bet.
Thank you. Bill, what are the typical distances you recommend maintaining from wireless radiation to minimize our exposure?
So as Magda and everyone else will agree, the greater, the farthest you can get away from it, the better. And then if you can turn off things, that's the ultimate thing. So to be, it just, I use sometimes the 15-foot rule or the 20-foot rule that get it at least 20 feet away if you're going to do that. But with the bags, I almost all my clients now purchase bags because you just don't know what's happening with the phone. Today it's safe, tomorrow, I mean, not as safe. The phone is at one level of radiation. The next new version comes out and it's even greater. So again, I would, and to be accurate, we always measure. So someone might be looking at one device, like I was in a home, they had a Wi-Fi router they were concerned about, but right under the TV, there was a wireless device that they didn't even know about. So if I said, get this far away from the router, they didn't get that far away from the wireless device. So I would always recommend that you have someone like me come in, or you buy meters to at least tell. Safe Living Technologies have two great little meters, the Safe and Sound Pro 2, and that's about $380 with numbers, but then they have this Safe and Sound Classic. For under $200, it could tell you if you have an issue, because when I go into a home, we find so many more devices that are creating radiation. So I would always, for $200, I would get that meter, and if you can, I would afford the $380 meter.
Everything from your coffee pot to your washing machine, your dryer. Yes. Might be emitting radiation nowadays, and you would not necessarily know it. There is one question I'd like to ask all of you. There's a question here: are EMF-free earbuds safe? I cannot imagine there's any such thing as EMF-free earbuds, meaning the things that stick in the ear and get wireless signals. That just sounds like fraudulent advertising.
Yeah. I measure anywhere from 80,000 to 172,000 on the earbuds. And there's one dominant one that communicates with your phone. So you have your phone here, where's your phone? And then it sends the signal to the other side of the head.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm reversed.
Yeah, they don't, because the signal, it doesn't get in very far, but talk about where it is. We're talking about the acoustic
Right.
nerve, talking about the brain. And one of the things that Dr. Brown mentioned today is when you're exercising vigorously and you have AirPods in your ears lose blood flow because the blood is going to your limbs and to your body for exercise. So you're limiting blood flow at the same time as you're increasing radiation. It seems like another recipe for a disaster. And people are already reporting headaches, dizziness, and some things associated in some people with these things. One of the questions, though, is you can't turn it off. You have to try to protect yourself in the sense that you're not going to be able to turn off the satellites, though I would like to. I think that people in areas where they do not have coverage, that's a whole other story. But we've got ample coverage, more than we need in many circumstances. So I'm afraid I must apologize, as I got double booked here. So I'm going to have to sign off now, but I want to thank you all for the hard work that you're doing, and I look forward to working with you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I'd like to show you something. This is a safe and sound meter, and this is these air, whatever they are. So watch this, and you can see this is my home. It's as low as we could get here in the DC metro area. I can assure you it is super challenging, but and we don't have Wi-Fi, or I don't have a phone on. So here's the earbuds. I'm just going to open them up, and you can see how it goes up just from opening this up. As well, if you took a phone, sorry, it's taking me a minute to remember my code. Okay, so the earbuds are closed now, and I'm gonna take it from airplane mode. Sorry, I have to hold it with two hands, which is a little challenging. So you can see the levels are pretty low, and then just turned it on, and the levels, that's when you put it right near your head, you can see the level, how high those levels are. So it's really good to have a meter to be able to measure and to find those sneaky sources that, trust me, are in your home that you did not know were there. I was floored when I got a meter and walked around my house, and it was really important so I could swap things out that I had that I didn't know were emitting, and also verify once you hardwire it that it's really off, or that you really made that change you wanted to make.
Thank you. Okay, so let's change things for a moment here, and let's assume that all we want to do now is 100% focus on exactly what we can do. So we all have a pen and paper in front of us. It says number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we just want you to tell us in as simple language as possible, step by step, exactly what you would recommend we do to minimize wireless radiation as best as possible. What can we hardwire? Tell us anything we could do, especially including how to have access to our laptop, our computer, and our phone. Is there a way to hardwire them? Is there a way to protect ourselves? So let's go step by step. What do you want us to do to get to minimize our exposure so we don't have a health issue? So any of you can go. Start with Theodora. Just say number 1. Let's give us the list. Let's see if we can make a plan to make us healthier, including wiring our cell phone if that's possible.
I'll just do like a few things, and we'll just go round robin then. So one would be with your, well, first with your phone, turn it off more often. Keep it away from your head. Don't carry it, and learn how to use a lot of the things that you probably do with your phone on wired tech. So get one of these, which is an adapter that I have that I can then connect my Ethernet into it, which is to my wired, oops, sorry, I just got a new one to show you, to my wired router. Well, it's actually a modem And then I plug this into the computer. I turn the Wi-Fi off on the computer. I am Zooming with you. I call people on the computer all the time. I am on the computer more than anyone should be on the computer, trust me, but I don't do it with the wireless on. So that's my hot tip, and I'm just going to pass the baton.
Before you pass it,
Oh.
what you just said, 100% allows someone with a laptop to have no wireless at all. Is there any way to do that with a phone?
Yeah, okay. And also you want to remember on your computer, you got to take a little time and learn about it. Be sure to turn it on, turn the Bluetooth off, and turn the Wi-Fi off on your computer too when you've done this. So with your cell phone, actually you can connect, and I don't have it with me right. Actually, yeah, you can use this with this newer phone. So you take the phone and you just plug that in, and then you can plug this in so that you can do pretty much anything on the phone that you would do on the Wi-Fi through a wire. However, you can't make calls the usual way. I think there is a way to make calls that I don't know about. If you did a way that you normally went through the internet, for example, or you could Zoom, and maybe someone has another idea. I just don't use my cell phone a lot, so I don't use this system. Some people have issues with the electrical fields, of which you can go online and find ways to minimize that. So yeah, and the other important thing is figuring out, if you can turn the Wi-Fi off your modem. That has been a real issue. The newer technology, the companies don't give you a choice. We should all have a choice with our modems and routers. And I ended up having to get my own, which I put in, so that I don't have to use the company one, which is emitting all the time, and there's really nothing we can do. Even when they say it's off, it is not off. So check that.
And when you're talking about your phone, you're saying when you connect it, you can use the internet. Can you get a text when it's connected hardwired?
That is a situation. So you can't get that green text that people have on their iPhones, which I don't understand. There are other ways that actually you can text with systems that I used to have down. This is an example of something that the companies, they need to compete on safety and make this possible for us. In fact, it's completely ridiculous that we don't have a cell phone that we can plug in wherever we go, to the store, wherever, and we can just get our texts, even write emails. We plug it in, all of that goes out. We unplug it, it undoes. There is a way to solve this problem. Companies can do it. They just need to hear from us and have their feet to the fire on this. So maybe someone else wants to add some hot tips. I thought I didn't want to, spend hours.
And my house is wired, so I don't have any radiation coming from within my own house. I use filters to clean up the dirty electricity, so my dirty electricity levels are very low. The only sources I have is a smart meter, some Wi-Fi coming from neighbors, but they're far enough away and the signal is very weak, so I get the green signal that Theodora gets in her home as well. And I'm not near any power lines, so I'm very fortunate in that regard. Earlier you asked about distances, and there's distances from devices, but there's also distances from power lines, and ideally you should be at least 50 to 100 meters away, depending on the type of power line we're dealing with. And you should be at least 500 meters away from a cell phone tower. And slightly further, probably a few, 4 or 5 kilometers away from radio frequencies with television radiation and broadcasting radio signals. So that's my little tip.
Bill?
Yeah, I would agree with Magda and Theodora. And if you can't turn things off, again, I would use the bags for the router. And again, people have security systems, doorbells that have pictures, and then also thermostats that are controlled by a Wi-Fi, unfortunately. So, and then again, the cell phone for the bag, and even with the bag, get it as far away as you can. And as Magda said, I would get the filters for the medium frequencies. They're high frequencies, which are wireless, medium frequencies. And then for the low frequencies, I would actually behind the head of the bed, if you can't turn the breakers off to your bedroom, then I would use a piece of foil that SLT, Safe Living Technologies, and because most people don't know, there's 3 sources of radiation. Outside the home, we have power lines, we have cell phone towers, we have neighbors, and then we also have the grid that sucks in dirty electricity. We have the second radiation source is the walls. So we have unshielded wires going through the walls, and the electric radiation comes out 6 to 8 feet. So when you're sleeping in a bed at night, you're getting all that radiation. So I like the foil behind the head of the bed. And then again, the dirty electricity filters. So anything you plug in will create, most appliances now will create dirty electricity. And so I put them on power strips so that under the TV, you have all the streaming stuff. And I always say, keep it off until you're going to watch it, then turn it back, turn it on and then turn it off. And that's a huge problem now around smart TVs. And in the States, we have wireless speakers that are putting out so much radiation, and people have so many smart TVs in so many rooms. So try to cut the power to all of those wireless devices, because there's always a phantom power that's there that continues to power up like the TV and other devices, so it doesn't have to completely warm up. And most of those things put out radiation. And I think someone was talking about a Wi-Fi or printers. Printers in your house, a lot of times if they're on, they produce Wi-Fi even if you're not using them. So try to use a power strip to cut those off.
Should we turn the power off to our bedroom if we can? If there's such thing as a master switch to turn the power off, does that make a difference?
So what happens in a room is that normally the outlets are controlled by a single breaker, but they could also control another room. So those are the ones that people normally turn off. But then if you're in a condo, you have to share a wall with someone else, then you can't turn off the neighbors if you have another bedroom. And again, at this point, you would need a meter, or you would need some type of device you would plug in like a little lamp to see which ones are being turned off. That's ideal, but more and more people, unfortunately, can't turn the power off. And that's why I like the foil behind the head of the bed. It's about 4 feet tall. And then it also stops the dirty electricity right behind the head of the bed, not around the bed, on the hot, neutral, and ground as well. And it really drops the electric fields down.
Can I ask you also, new cars have more tech than ever. They have self-driving. What's going on with and you could turn off the wireless in some of them, but it's still communicating with satellites. It's still got an emergency, some way that it contacts if you're in an accident. So what's happening to us wirelessly? What kind of exposure are we experiencing when we're in a new car?
We've measured a number of cars, and they have high magnetic field from the battery particularly. The electric vehicles are the worst. The battery tends to be in the back seat, which is where we not normally put children, in their safe carriers. The Tesla vehicle, Elon Musk is a very brilliant man, but he doesn't understand health of electromagnetic fields, or he wouldn't have made the Tesla car the way he did. It's not shielded at all. And many electrosensitive people can't drive in one of those. These cars have radar now. They can sense things around them. So you're exposed not only to lower frequencies, but you're also exposed to microwave frequencies in a car. And if you use your phone in the car, it tends to, reverberate because of all the metal around it. So it increases your exposure as well. I think what we really need to do is reach out to manufacturers and get them to design cars where we can turn things off. If they insist on putting in these different frequencies, we have to be able to turn them off. And I think the best way to do this is to simply, go to a car dealer and ask them what the features are and whether or not they can't be turned off, and let them know under no circumstances would you buy a car where you're exposed nonstop while you're driving it.
When you fly in an aeroplane, I've heard that when you go from New York to LA, it's like getting several chest X-rays. What kind of radiation are you exposed to? Is this a concern? Should we avoid flying in airplanes?
You're exposed to 3 types of radiation. One is cosmic radiation, because you're higher up in the atmosphere, so there's less filtering. And a lot of that is ionizing radiation, so that's not that's not beneficial. You're exposed to microwaves now because they have Wi-Fi on airplanes. So, you know, and depending on where the hotspots are, the routers are, that's where you're going to get hotspots. And you're exposed to low frequency electric and magnetic fields. We measured the cockpit of an airplane where the levels were really, really high, and it's a high magnetic field. And this is prior to 2/11, or to 9/11. So they allowed me to actually go into the cockpit. And it turned out that the pilots have to heat the windshield, because if a bird or some particle hits it, if it's heated, it will have more flexibility and it won't crack. And when they turned off the heater, the magnetic field decreased incredibly. But then they have these big conduits that go right through the cockpit and then right through the length of the plane. And if you're close to one of those, that's where all the wires are, and that's where you're going to get your highest exposure. And the levels are really high behind both the pilot and the co-pilot.
So should you give a choice in sitting first class or the last seat in the plane? From a Wi-Fi point of view, are you better off sitting in the back of the plane? Does it make a difference?
You have Wi-Fi at different locations. So where you see the Wi-Fi router, that's what you should try to avoid as much as possible. For magnetic fields, closer to the cockpit seem to have higher magnetic fields than near the rear of the plane.
And if we don't take a plane, should we take Amtrak? Is that better? Or are you exposed to something else?
You know, we had students in my course when I was at the university still teaching, and we measured streetcars and subways, and the levels, you know, are really quite high in these vehicles. And the more people that are using their wireless technology, the higher the levels become. And once again, you're surrounded by metal, so things are bouncing around. So unfortunately, people who are electrosensitive have difficulty with public transit, of the different, you know, sorts of public transit because of this.
So what's better, car, plane, or train?
Walking, bicycle.
Assume you have to go far.
Maybe someone else can answer that, because I really don't know.
I think this is a false choice, because what we have to do is get government and industry to address this issue.
Right.
It shouldn't be on us. It is really impossible to travel without being exposed. So it's like food, you know, you can eat well a certain amount of the time, and then sometimes if it doesn't make you sick, because if people are sick, then they get so sick that they literally can't travel. But I try to decrease everything I can when I can, and then there are times when I'm just exposed. But it's really unacceptable that we're being exposed in this way daily without people even knowing. I mean, it was not like this just a few generations ago in terms of the wireless and all the wireless signals that we have now. It's simply, this wasn't the situation. We didn't have all these charging, you know, all these charging cords on our phones. I don't have an example, but if you don't want to use a charging phone to your head and these charging things attached to everything on these laptops, they are a serious problem that they just weren't here
What if you're
decades ago.
What if you're in a car with someone else and they are using a cell phone, or they just have the cell phone on? They're not even talking on it, it's on. Is
Yeah.
this like a mild issue, or is this like get out of the car?
I would say get out of the car.
Hey,
You know, it reflects, metal reflects and causes changes to the signal that are unexpected, and it can be more intense in a car. It's really important to know when the levels get higher. Like if you have to use a wireless device, know when it's going to go to its highest power. If you're in a car, if you're in an elevator, if you're in a something round that's metal that you're in, or also if you're traveling, the issue with that is that sometimes the phone is trying to reach the tower, and then as it moves, it says goodbye to the old tower and hello to the new tower, and so those signals can be more intense. But the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends turn it off in a car.
But what do we, I mean, the question is, it's one thing if you live by yourself, but if you live amongst people,
Mm,
you haven't heard the three of you and Devra speak,
mm.
everyone seems to think it's fine to use a cell phone. So again, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess, why don't you each give a closing 1 minute summation of your thoughts and maybe include how to take this advice into the real world when it's not just us, we're around other people, and and everyone has their phones on. So I guess your best thoughts on how to take all this advice in and apply it. Magda, why don't you go, then Bill, then Theodora?
Well, there have been a number of recommendations on how to minimize your exposure. And the more you can do to minimize your exposure, the better it is. You might not have it perfectly reduced to zero, but that doesn't matter because your body can heal. So I would recommend that you not fret about this. You don't want to get anxious about it because that's just going to be harmful for your own body. The more healthy things that you can do with your body, the more you can avoid the radiation or reduce the radiation, the better off you'll be.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. And so a lot of times with my clients, we know what we start at, and then we know what we reduced it to, and it's like over 90% reduction. So anytime you can get over a 90% reduction in all three types of radiation, the high, medium, and low. And for people, if someone's interested in them, in this, what I often do is I have stories that I talk about. So if it's a young lady or someone that has a young daughter, I'll say I knew someone that kept a cell phone by her pillow, or I didn't know her personally, but a friend of mine did, and she developed a huge tumor on the side of her face. She was 16 years old. And then she had a 6-hour surgery. It wasn't cancerous. I said, good. I hope the surgeon tells her not to keep her cell phone on the pillow, because as we've all said, it goes off anywhere from 6 to 30 seconds, thousands of times the radiation. And then I saw that lady about a year later. She said, you know that 16-year-old girl? I said, yeah. She's 17. I said, oh, the tumor grew back. Now it was cancerous. Now it was a 9-hour surgery, and she had to have plastic surgery on the side of her face for a young teenage girl. And if she just would have moved that phone away, so I normally wouldn't have been an issue. So normally I have a story. It's about a guy who carries a phone in a pocket. He did it as a freshman in high school. When he became 19, he jumped off a rock, broke his hip, and then they took him in. And basically what they found was a huge tumor right where he kept the phone for four years. And then when they cut through the tumor, the doctor, what she saw was the bone was completely dissolved, and he had a hip replacement at 19 years old. So I try to put the story based on the environment. And that's about the only way, or it's a way for people to then think about them or their kids or their grandkids.
Thank you. Theodora?
Oh, yeah, I've been, having worked on this for a long time, we have so many people contact us with these stories. They tell,
Yeah.
and it's heartbreaking,
Oh,
really
it is.
heartbreaking. And most people have passed away, but for many of them, they have taken time to write letters to their local governments to do everything possible to try to fix it, so no one has to go through what they went through. So this is the time to learn more about it, make the changes you can. It's really a process. So, I started out just taking certain steps, and then I learned more and I took next steps, and it happened. And really talk to your local governments. This is really important to get things on the record so they hear from you. Because if they don't hear from you, they don't think that it's really something they should care about because their constituents aren't coming to them. And, find out what's going on at the federal level in whatever country you're in as well, and get involved with those groups. So find out who's doing this work, connect with them, and I believe that we are going to fix this. I don't know when, but there's only one way. It's the way forward. So I'm in.
Magda, is there a way for us to stay in touch with you, stay involved? Do you have a website? Do you do consultations? What's the best way to follow up with you?
I do have a website, several websites, but you can just email me. I placed my email in the chat, so anyone who saves it, but it's Dr. Magda Havas at gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me.
And what's your website?
Yeah, www.magdahavas.com. I also have www.theroselab.com. And I also have a zoriglazier.com website where there's a lot of old material that's been saved that Dr. Zori Glazier, a microwave expert in the US government, had as part of his research.
And do you do phone consultations or Zoom consultations for people?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Bill, how would we stay in touch with you and your work?
The website is stopdirtyelectricity.com. And so that's the best way to get a hold of me. You can send me a number and then, or send me an email. And then also my phone number is out there, 702-845-5794. So again, if I do consultations as Magda does over the phone. And the other thing I was going to say is, on the website, you asked about 10 tips of reducing wireless radiation. So here's something someone can download for free. It's just at the top of the website. It's 10 things. And I print these in the thousands, or 1,000 of them, and they're in doctors' offices and they're in different areas. So at least if I meet someone, I don't have to say, go to my website. I say, here's 10 things you can do. And here's the key if it's a guy. If it's a guy, ask if he has a partner or a wife, give it to them. Ladies are the smart one. I want to know how fast a car goes. My wife wants to know how safe that car is. So again, 10 ways you can reduce your wireless radiation right now. Easy steps.
Thank you. Theodora, how do we follow up with you and your work?
Oh, sure. Go to ehsciences.org. I'm putting a link in the chat because we have ehsciences.org wireless health facts, and that is a link I also put in for our newsletter. We haven't got it up and running, but we will soon, just on wireless. Now, I should add that Environmental Health Sciences also works on plastics and all kinds of other toxins, so you might be interested in our other newsletters as well, and the investigative reporting that they've been doing. So, and my email I put in the chat also, Theodora at ehsciences.org.
And do you do Zoom consultations with people?
I don't necessarily, but I will. I educate all the time. I'll do Zoom talks if people want to learn. I am really excited about helping educate people. I also, as I'm sure Dr. Havas and Bill do, I talk to communities, to schools, to neighborhood groups. So I think this is great. One benefit of technology is that, we can be Zooming. I've Zoomed all across the country. Sometimes I have 3 or 4 Zooms a night, and I'm just talking about this issue, educating communities on this. And I'm absolutely up for that. To your PTA, to your administrators, just I'd love to share this information.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much for sharing this. It's a lot of information to take in. It's a tough subject because there's no beautiful answer, but it's very important that we understand it and do what we can. So I want to thank you very much, and I'd like to unmute everyone so everyone can thank you as well for sharing this knowledge that you've worked so hard to get.
Thank you very much. Extremely valuable.
It's
Thank
you all.
you.
What would I